From the crack house to the White House. This is Paul Johnson with the Optimistic American, and I have a special guest today, Tonja Myles. We're going to be talking about her experience actually working in the White House for the Bush administration, but how that came from a lifetime worth of adventures, including an individual who was an addict, who actually spent time in a crack house, time in the military, the National Guard, as well as creating a program that's been highly successful at being able to help other people who are addicts. I think you'll enjoy this show. If you like this program, I'm just an ordinary, optimistic American who still believes that the United States is a cause for good, and Tonja is one of those causes for good. Push that subscribe button and let's get going. Well, Tonja, I'd like to first welcome you to the Optimistic American and tell you that we very much appreciate having you on today to talk about your life and your books and all the other things that you've done.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, so I am going to start with your first book. You have had an amazing life, an adventuresome life, a lot of hardships that have been in your life as well. But I want to start with the book, From the Crack House to the White House. One, it's a good book. I recommend it to people to read, but to me, that's the right place to tell your story. Talk to me about the book itself, why you wrote it, and the journey that you went on to that gave you that particular title.
Well, first of all, I never had a desire to write a book. My mom was an avid reader. She would get into a book, and you would be sitting right there, but you would lose her. And so I did not get that gene. And so when I decided or was asked to write this book, look, I've let many people share my story inside of their publications, their documentaries, and things of that nature. And so I have done some amazing things. I have done some hard things, but this was one of the hardest. Even though I'm an advocate, mental health advocate when it comes to mental health and substance abuse, I've always told my story. But can I tell you, when I had to sit down and put pen to paper, it was no joke. And so from the crack house to the White House is kind of my story of how, my strength and resiliency paid off and how I was once addicted to drugs and all the things that happened in between. And then one day I got this call from the White House, and I thought it was a joke. And it was Jim Toohey. Jim Toohey at the time was the director for the White House faith-based
Bush administration.
For the Bush administration. And he was also Mother Teresa's attorney at one time. And so Jim called me on a Friday, asked me a series of questions, and we just hit it off instantly. And then fast forward to Sunday, I got a call. I was standing in my kitchen, and it was a call, and it said, "This is the White House. President and Mrs. Bush would like you to be their special guest at the State of the Union address." And I'm like, And I just bust out laughing, like, for real? You're just kidding me, right? And he's like, "This is not a joke." So anyway, so Tuesday later, here it is. I am on the East Wing with some other amazing people. I get whisked off to Capitol Hill in a motorcade, and I was told to find your name, sit down, and be quiet. And so I automatically go to the back row because I'm thinking, I've watched, State of the Union addresses before, and I'm like, I know I'm probably on the back row because nobody, why should I be front and center? So I went to the back row, went to the next row, and then I went to the Secret Service. I'm like, I think y'all got this wrong. I'm not supposed to be here. My name is nowhere in here. And so he did this little thing like that. And he said, "Follow me." And I'm walking down the stairs, and all of a sudden I'm looking, I'm like, I see my name, another soldier name, and Mrs. Bush. And I'm like, okay, this just got real. Sat with Mrs. Bush. President Bush talked about our program, gave us this amazing shout out. I'm standing there, and most time people kind of stand up and wave. I could not do that because if I would have done that, I probably would have tumbled over and it would have been a really scene. So I just kind of did this and did this. And so, I think it was the Washington Post or the New York Times said that I was the most unusual person to be ever invited to a State of the Union address. So anyway, I thought it would be a one and done time that I would meet the president. Had no idea that it would be 6 years of my life, working with the administration, advising them on subject matter when it came to addiction across the country. And can I tell you, end up in the president's library and it was like a match made in history.
There you go. All right. So I'm going to break this apart into a couple of pieces. First, talk to me what it was like to actually work in the White House.
Well, first of all, we frequent the White House a whole lot. Jim was so gracious. And again, when President Bush wanted Congress to give more money to address addiction in our country, particularly when it came to faith based organizations, it was the first time this had ever been done. And so he liked our program. Look, they did a search across America and came across me. And so that within itself was like so cool. And so it was really interesting. It was stressful, but it was, it was educational. It was an adventure every time, we walked in those spaces and places. There were many times that I went with the president and either introduced him, one time sung before he came on stage. That was pretty cool. And other places. And so look, we would go into the West Wing, and one time we went to the White House mess with Jim Toohey. Me and my husband was making this joke like, "Oh yeah, they're gonna have peanut butter and jelly," ha ha ha, and it's a joke. Well, guess what? They had peanut butter and jelly because peanut butter and jelly and barbecue chips was President Bush. That was his favorite meal. But the cool thing, I think, one of the coolest things, I mean, seeing Abraham Lincoln photo, John F. Kennedy, and sometimes seeing all these other amazing people, front and center was amazing. But I think the biggest thing for me is when we were walking in the West Wing and we were walking straight, and then I seen the war room, and it's like my knees drop. I'm a veteran, so it's almost like I stop breathing and go, "Wait, what? I am just that close." Because the West Wing is really small. It's not really huge, and so it was just always amazing. Every time that I was in the presence of President Bush, he was always gracious and funny. And they always treated me with dignity, respect. And, I have so many funny stories. I would go with him in different meetings and I would sit to the left of him a lot. And so it was just a joy to see him, work the room. But at the end of the day, my biggest joy was to be a part of history when it came to addressing, addiction in our country.
Yeah, and it's funny some of the things you say about the White House that I think most people would be surprised about. That one that you said was, "It is not as big as you think." It really is a very small, intimate office setting. It's the most powerful office anywhere in the world, but yet we don't believe in royalty, and it's not a castle for royalty. Now, I will say something about that mess, the White House mess. The Navy cooks for them, and they take pride in the idea that they will cook you almost anything that you ask for, and it is some great cooking. You can get Southern cooking, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I mean, it just whatever it is that you want, they really can do a great job of it. But again, just a small room. It is not a big room at all, and it's amazing how many average people like you and I have been in and out of that room. So it is the people's house, as they say. All right, so you had this program before, and the program that you had gained attention by the president. Talk to me about what that program was and what made it special.
So, what made it special was the fact that, we wake up every day to push hope. I say all the time, it does not discriminate from the curbside to the country club. It can affect us all. And so, my husband and I, we started, this program in our community where we would go out into the most challenging neighborhoods. We would go into churches, nursing homes, prisons, you name it, and just talk to people about hope, to let them know that God had a plan for their life, and then provide resources as well. And so we have been doing that for a while, and my husband had been doing volunteer work at the Salvation Army for many years. And so it's just places like that in our community that we were going into, meeting people where they are, letting them know that hope, help, and healing was theirs. And so because we were doing all this amazing work, that's kind of how they came across us. And so a few years after that, we were
was part of it focused on addiction. You talked about the religious aspect of it, or the interfaith component to it. But was it focused on addiction, or was it really just focused on trying to evangelize?
No, it was focused on addiction. But at the end of the day, like I said, I'm gonna always, tell people about my faith, how my journey from being addicted, from being molested, from having be at the time, a two-time suicide attempt survivor, how my faith played a strong role in my recovery and in my healing. And look, the places and spaces that I came out of, I made a promise to God. So I have a promise to keep, first of all. I made a promise to him, if he would help me, I would help others. And even today, I am not
It's beautiful.
back down off of that. And so it was a faith-based organization that we had that later became a nonprofit. And we also had the privilege of starting the first licensed faith-based treatment program in the state of Louisiana, the first of its kind in the nation. I mean, we did everything according to what the license and standards was. But see, that's what President Bush was saying, that look, if faith-based organization had good outcomes, why not, fund them? Because at the time, people were talking about, separation of church and state, and that was the government money. But first of all, that is not the government money. That is my money. That is our money. We all pay into those taxes or pay into that system. So it's our money. Even when people say that, I'm like, no, that's not the government money. That's our money. We work hard for that. And so now to be able to have a place at the table for faith-based organizations who are, licensed, we lead with faith, and we tell people all the time, look, people have a choice. They knew we were faith-based when they walked in the door. It wasn't nothing that we were telling them they had to do. It's just like going to, a burger joint. You can go to different ones. You know what you're getting, because you know what it says on the outside of the door. And so it was just an honor for him to really be so focused and saying, hey, look, if faith-based organizations do great work, they have good outcomes, and they have the same rules that everybody else have, let's fund those. And so that was what his platform was all about. And so to have him recognize our program, because we only, we just didn't address addiction. We addressed the root cause. What would cause a person to, risk their lives to use crack or use opioids or fentanyl? Look, I had dreams just like anybody else. I wanted to sing on Broadway. I wanted to entertain people. I did not say, you know what, when I was a little girl, one day I think I want to be a crackhead. Life happened. And so we need to make sure that people have the best choices and the best resources that they can possibly can, so they can get their life in order. And so that's what Set Free Indeed is all about. Again, we come from a place of love, a place of concern, and we push hope every day. And look, we've seen thousands and thousands of people, get their lives in order, and they live these productive lives. Now, the flip side of that, we've seen a lot of people lose their life because of addiction. We know that we're in a crisis right now in our country, and we wake up every day to save lives, because addiction is real, but so is recovery.
Um, I personally agree with you on the faith-based portion. I have spent a lot of time with Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12-step program, and it starts with, you have to acknowledge that there's a problem that's bigger than you, and that you have to be willing to give in to that greater source. Now, I believe that's God, but they leave that open for you to decide what it is. But it's so important, because what I've seen with addiction and people who have been challenged by addiction is that if you really think you can just step up and fix the problem without acknowledging that maybe it's bigger than you, you're probably going to fail. You're probably not going to be successful. If you would, let's go back to your time in the military. Talk to me about that. You spent time in the military. I want to kind of understand what that was like, where you were deployed to, what branch of the service you were in.
So yeah, another funny story. So yeah, I was in college at the time, not doing the right thing, and for a while, wasn't even going to classes. Kind of was just kind of hanging out, if you will. And so my mom and dad found out, and they were like livid, and they were just like, you know what? We're not paying for your college anymore. You get that the best way you can. And I'm like, well, okay, I'm gonna fix you guys. I'm gonna find a way. And so I enlisted in the National Guard. And I tell people all the time, it wasn't, my desire that I was going to go in and serve my country. I did it, not to get back at my parents, but I needed a way to, if I was going to, try to do the right thing to, go back to college. And at the time, the GIBO, looked promising. But can I tell you, it was 9 years of the best years of my life. My dad was a Navy guy. My dad trained me to fight while wounded, because he had this little girl. who had all these hopes and dreams, who was happy and wanted to entertain people. But all of a sudden, she came this little angry monster, not knowing that I had been molested by the guy down the street and was told not to tell anyone. And I had all these emotions and all of this rage and all these questions that I couldn't answer. And so he didn't know what to do with me. So they put me in everything because I wanted to fight. I love to fight for a good cause. I do have PTSD. It doesn't come from being in the military. It's come from untreated trauma. And so my dad just always taught me to fight, to stand up for what I believe in, to stand up for the underdog. And so my dad was also, a Navy guy. He was a tough guy. And so he trained me to be tough. And some of his tactics might have not have been what most people thought was cool. But for me, it worked because he was tough on me. And so when I went to the military,
I bet you our dads were a lot alike. My dad had a lot of tactics that wouldn't be considered right either.
oh
But anyway,
no, and yeah, because look, I tell people something that he did, and they was like, "Wait, what?" And I'm like, for example, when he taught me how to change a tire, and one night I was out, doing my thing, and I called him probably at 1:30 in the morning. I'm like, "Hey, my tire's on the flat. I need you to come get me." He's like, "What? Didn't I teach you how to change a tire?" And he hung up on me, you know. And guess what? I changed the tire, and stuff like that. But because he didn't know, he was just wondering why would his little girl want to kill herself, And so he was trying the best that he could without resources. And so when I went to the military and basic training, I'm like, this is great because I also like structure. Even though I had a lot of things going on in my head, I love structure because that's how my daddy ran our house. And so when I went to the basic training, I excelled as a soldier. I loved it because I love teamwork. I love camaraderie. I like being mission minded. And it was just so amazing. And, I love to fight for something I believe in. And so I loved it. I thrived in it. And, the drill sergeants would try to get in my head. And I'm just like, y'all, screaming at me. I was a challenging child. So this means nothing. So even when I got to AIT, so I was a military police for 9 years with the Louisiana Army National Guard. I did, get to go overseas a lot and do some full-time active duty. I loved it. I really did. I loved, being a soldier. I loved serving other soldiers. I loved to know that it was a mission, it was a cause, and let's go get it. Let's make it happen. And so I stayed in for 9 years, and I did end up going to Operation Just Cause, and that was when the soldiers from Panama was going into, Iraq and Iran, and so we took up the slack for them, which was pretty, incredible. And I wanted to go to the Gulf War. At the time, I was, engaged, and my husband thought, "Nah, I don't think you should." I shouldn't have listened to him. Well, I'm glad I did. But, I love being in the military. I do a lot for veterans even now. And look, if something happened in our country, I would be the first person to sign up because I made a good soldier. I am a good soldier.
yeah, and you said it a moment ago. You have to start with the belief that we're still a cause for good, and I think the United States is maybe the greatest cause for good.
Well, look, let me just say this. My family is here. My family is here. The people that I love the most is here. So for that I will defend, and I have nieces and nephews who, because I don't have any kids, who are coming behind me. And I need to do whatever I can to make, my country, my community, the best that I possibly can, for them. For that I serve, and for that I'll defend.
All right, so let's go to the addiction part. Can you give me maybe the journey of your addiction and when you really began to recognize that you were an addict and what you were able to do to overcome it?
Well, for many years, I didn't think I was. I just, the mental health side, which I didn't address until later years, was the thing that caused me to really spiral because I had all this pain and shame and I didn't know what to do with it. And I didn't have a place to talk about, my feelings. 'Cause, in my family, you didn't go to a doctor. You didn't talk about things like that. You just pray about it and sweep it under the rug. And so I carried this baggage and burden with me for many, many years. And anytime I could get my hand on drugs, I started with, marijuana to pills to cocaine. And I said I would never do crack. And before you know it, I was, doing crack cocaine. And it's so funny. People, used to say, well, you didn't look like a crackhead. I'm like, y'all watch too much TV. Crackheads just don't look like people on the street, or people who, look like, disheveled. I mean, I didn't look like what I was going through, but my parents knew that there was a lot of things going on. They just didn't know what to do with it. And addiction took me places and spaces that I thought I would never, ever go to. And it's a miracle that I'm alive because most people did not think I would, live past 18 because of my behavior.
When did you get to your low?
I got to my low. Look, I, OD'd a couple of times. I remember the first time, and I was in a hotel room, and I'm like, oh God, if you get me out of it, I'll never do it again. And of course, 3 days later, I was back doing it. And so it just got to the point I had lied to my parents. I had, stole from them out their bank account. And I just became this person that, I didn't even like who I was. To be honest, most of my life, I lived trying to die because I did not like who I became because of all the things that I had went through, because of the untreated trauma. And then the addiction just aspirated it. And so I never forget, I always, like I said, I always was living to die, but I always wanted to die on my terms. And that's kind of another thing that made me a good soldier because I wasn't scared to die. And I'm like, if I perish, I perish. And so when it got to the point where, again, I just did not recognize who I was, I didn't even believe my own self. And I went to my grandmother and I told her that, the enemy is just really trying to take my life. And I just, came to the point that was my, after, I think it was maybe not shortly after my second suicide attempt. And my grandmother told me that God had a plan and purpose for my life. And all I had to do was just believe that He created me to do something great. And when she told me that, I took her at her word. I did not look back. And I told God this, I said, if you help me, if you give me my dignity back, if you give me my self-respect back, I promise you, I will serve you all the days of my life. And I will go back. And anybody who's going through this kind of mess and trials and tribulations, I will go back in and I will help them. And so I never look back. And look, I got clean being cold turkey. I wouldn't recommend that to a lot of people, but I did. And I did a whole 6 years of rehabilitation where I, began to find out who I was and remember not only who I was, but whose I was. And I had to learn how to walk different, talk different. I had to become this new creature. And I made a vow to Him. And so that's why I wake up every day on a mission.
You've dealt with lots of people since then who have had addictions. So, I don't claim to be an expert on this, although I've had definitely my share of addicts in my life. Do you think that it's always about self-medicating, that addiction comes from people who have some underlying pain or trauma and they're trying to self-medicate either through alcohol or through drugs?
Oh, absolutely. I know the science says that it is a disease, which I get, but I also believe it is a dis-ease of something else that's going on internally. For me, it was the abuse, the sexual trauma that I never got treated. And so, just like you said, it was a way for me to mask. It was a way for me to cope. It was a way for me to drown out the pain. And so I thought. And, I've worked with thousands and thousands of people. And even when we opened our treatment facility, that was one of the things that we were determined to do to get to the root cause, not to ask people, what the hell is wrong with you, but maybe what happened to you. And then if we can pinpoint that pain, that shame, and give that pain a name, just like any other thing, then we can begin to address it and give people hope. And so, so many people are going through addiction in our country, and we're so quick to judge them. And that's why we work a lot. I work for the Huntsman Family Foundation, and one of our greatest missions is to eradicate stigma around addiction and mental health. Because, the data shows, and if you ask a person who's going through addiction, a lot of time it's the shame that keeps them from getting the help that they need. And we want people to know that you're not the only one. There are others like me, who have these amazing stories, who had to, work their program, work their faith. And now we go back and we tell people, look, no shame, no condemnation, no judgment, no stigma. There's hope, there's help, there's healing.
So I'd love advice for family members of addicts. I can't tell you how many interventions I've been in, but in my experience, they were almost never successful. The only successes that we really found ended up being when the person who was an addict reached a low, generally that hurt people that they didn't want to hurt, and they began to feel that pain themselves, and they made the conscious decision they wanted to change. But have you had a different experience? Again, what do you recommend for family members who are going through this addiction next to someone that they love?
That's a challenging one. Look, my mom and dad both were addicts. My dad was a functioning addict. He went to work every day, had a good job, and he drank a lot. So did my mom. But my mom got to the point where after I got clean, I think I had been clean probably over a year, a little bit over a year, and I was getting ready to drop out of school because I wanted to take care of my mom. Because here it is, I found this freedom from being off drugs, and there was no way I could sit and watch my mom, lose her life to drinking herself to death. And it was through one of my professors who told me about getting my mom, PEC. And so I went down to the coroner's office, talked to them. They called my dad, talked to my dad, and the next day, the police came to pick up my mom, which that's where I work now, to on 988 and all these other things that have changed since then. Because there's nothing like, seeing, the sheriff department, knock on your door. And I knew that they were coming, and to pick up my mom. And when I opened the door, and she was in the back, and she was sitting on the couch, and she was drunk. And they said, Miss Hattie, we come to get you some help. And they handcuffed her and put her in the back of the car. That's why I work to make sure stuff, we change the way that whole scenario looks. And so my mom was mad at me when I went to give her clothes. 2 days later, she said, "You're dead to me. I don't ever want to speak to you again. All the crap you put me through, and your addiction, and you locked me up. I never want to see you again." That was another hard thing. But I must say that 30 days later, when she got clean, she said that was the best decision anybody could ever make for her. And my mom, before she died, had 25 years clean. And so to family members, I know it's hard. I know, addiction affects their entire family. People don't realize that. If you have someone in your family who has an addiction issue, it can just make the whole family dynamic so messed up. And so I tell those family members, find what resources are in your community. Al-Anon is a good program because a lot of times family members don't know what to do, don't know how to navigate through that system. There are so many other families who are going through the same thing. And when you, reach out for help through Al-Anon, through your local, faith-based organization, find out, who those other family members are. Find out the resources, and give those resources to your loved one. Look, at the end of the day, we know it's everybody's free choices, and it's only so much people can take. And I tell people, it's not cookie cutter. I wish I could tell every family member, you do this, 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 and this is going to happen. Because I've seen family members spend millions of dollars to, get their family, into treatment. And then I also know families who have no money and help get their family members into treatment. It's up to the individual. They'll know when. I tell them to file after peace, but make sure you give them the best options and possible so they can experience recovery. But at the end of the day, it's up to that person. And look, we know that's a hard one right there. But, a person have to be sick and tired of being sick and tired. And look, I'll say this. I tell family members all the time, it's not like that you don't love your loved one because addiction, it hijacks your brain. And so when you help that loved one try to make the best decision and they do, that's awesome. When they don't, that is when you have to let go and, let God and know that if loving them was enough, there would be no addiction in our country.
Yeah, I I definitely felt your pain when you were talking about your mom and the challenge of making that very, very hard decision. Um, in my experience, and this is not scientific, so I just have to go by my experience. You can love people, but oftentimes if you love them so much that you're not willing to push back,
Mm-hmm.
you're just enabling them.
Mm-hmm.
You're enabling them to continue doing what they're doing. Everybody has to reach a low for them to be able to make a decision to turn around. And unfortunately, that low for some people, it's extreme. For many people, it was enough that they maybe got into a car accident or they said something that they didn't want to say. But for other people, that low can literally mean they either lose their life or came very close to losing their life. The Wherever that place is, they have to find it. You can't find it for them. But what you can do is you can begin to set boundaries
Yep.
and boundaries that you're going to live with. You can't go so extreme and so far that you won't live with it, like saying, I'll never talk to you or work with you again. But you can say, hey, if this doesn't happen, I can't let you keep living here. We're going to
Yeah.
have to figure out a new arrangement. You can take steps and try to enforce those. And if you do them in small steps instead of big steps, and they start to recognize that you're going to do the first small step and then the next small step and then the next small step, they then begin to believe you that you're going to do the more extreme step
Mm-hmm.
when you start talking about taking it. Again, I don't have any scientific information on that other than more experience than I wish I had with it. But that to me has been the only thing that I found. But what it's really doing is it's making them responsible for it, not you responsible for it.
Yeah, because enabling people, that's a real thing. Look, I can tell you family after family story. One dad, I said, look, you know, you might as well just go give the drug dealer, you know, money a week because that's basically all you're doing, And I was just like, you're gonna have to talk about boundaries. You're gonna have to set those boundaries, those healthy boundaries. You know, um, I used to ask family members, well, who paid the car note, who pays their rent. I'm like, because if they, you pay the car note, that might be, something you have to say. Look, I love you. I always lead with I love you, but I can't do this anymore because if I'm paying this and you got and you hurt someone, then all of us are gonna feel the ripple effect, and that's not cool that you do that anyway. And so, find out, I always say love first and leverage. And because at the end of the day, all you could do is try to provide, places and spaces for them to make better choices. And then, people have to get in treatment. I mean, I'm a strong component of that. I mean, if I have any other challenge in my life, I know I need to go physically or mentally. I need to go see a doctor. I need to see a professional. Go see someone. Treatment is a beautiful thing. I mean, addiction is real, mental health is real, but so is recovery. And look, every day, as we address the nonprofit we have, we do a lot of work to address, drug overdoses in our community. And, we tell people all the time, we're just out here trying to save lives until people have a, aha moment, where the reward of recovery outweigh the risk of dying. And, sometimes it takes people a long time to get it. And sometimes people get it a little quicker than others. But at the end of the day, always know that we always offered hope. We don't play because it's real out here. Too many people are dying of drug overdoses, and we're not addressing it like we should. We talk about all the murders that are happening in our country and community. That's right, but we have more people dying of drug overdoses. But then, I've heard people say, well, that's just another crackhead. Are you kidding me? That's somebody's son and daughter. They had hopes and dreams, and drugs hijacked their brain. Yes, they might have done some challenging things and some things that, was out of the ordinary or, not good, but that's still a human being. And at the end of the day, I'm going to always lead with love. And people know we don't play, for real, for real. We are rough and tough, but we're also lovable. And being a person with lived experience, when we're out there talking to people who are going through, addiction, we always tell them, look, hey, I've been where you are. If I can do it, you can do it. And there's nothing like the voice of lived experience to really help, in this epidemic we have going on in our country right now.
Yes, absolutely. All right. So you wrote another book called Peace Over Politics. What led you so far astray from dealing with addiction into the political realm? Although you did spend time in the White House, that may explain part of it. But help me understand that and what the book was about.
So, mental health is another thing, like I said, passionate about when it comes to addressing mental health in our country. We know that the CDC says, and a lot of our top mental health experts say that mental health, we're in a mental health crisis. After COVID, it just made things worse. And so many people are having challenge with their mental health. And again, that's a huge stigma right there because there's mental wealth, there's mental health, mental wealth, mental wellness, all of that. But at the end of the day, our brain is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And just like any other organ in our body, we have to take care of it. And so we have not addressed it because of stigma. And so that's been a space that I've always worked in mental health. But I must tell you, I had no desire to do another book. And so last year, around this time, I just felt God was telling me, you have to write this other book. And I'm like, who, me? And I'm like, nah, you got the wrong person, God. It's not me. And so me, because, I'm so smart and I'm going to show God that he's not getting this right. Ha ha. So I'm going to go and I'm Googling, like, let me see what books are out there to address, mental health and politics. That was not many. And I'm like, and he was like, Tonja, I don't know why you waste your time because you're going to do what I told you to do, or you know how it's going to turn out. So anyway, I'm like, yes, sir. So I began to do research and I didn't see a whole lot out there. And so because I have a background in mental health and I work in that space a lot, I'm like, okay, if I'm feeling some kind of way and feeling a little anxiety, other people must be doing it the same. And so that's when I began to put pen to paper and do some research and got with some of my friends who are mental health professionals. And, now we have a book. And, who knew that, well, God did. That's why he had me write it, but now look where we are with so much anxiety and depression and people all in their feelings about everything political and all of the hate and all of the going back and forth and the disrespect. Y'all, we got to get this better. We have to get this. We have to do this together. Because if we don't, then it's going to be demise, of our community and country. And so I wrote this book out of love, and I think it's one of the best things that I've ever done. Just to let people know that you have to protect your peace during any political climate, but then also how to be respectful, how to do active listening, how to be involved in your community. I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican, but just as a human being, just as a citizen, of this great country. How do we have these conversations? Because we're gonna be different. When we don't think the same, we have different views. But how do we sit down and have candid conversations without cussing each other out? That got to stop.
Yeah, it's my partner and I, Dr. Emily Basha, we wrote a book called Addictive Ideology. So it kind of plays into both of the things that you're talking about, how political ideologies oftentimes can become addictive, right? And so what we do is we create these constructs in our mind, and through those constructs, we have this tendency to want to be right. And so then we get into these arguments and debates with others. And effectively, if they don't agree with our construct, it kind of blows apart our worldview, and that has a negative effect on how we see things. But what you're not recognizing in that is that the beginning point is the ideology. Maybe if you backed off of that ideology and instead of believing that you had to have a perfect construct for how the world worked, your construct became, I'm going to listen and learn from others. I'm going to listen and learn from the right and the left and the MAGA group and the progressive group. And I'm going to try to understand where it is that they're coming from to figure out where it is that we can find common ground and where it is that I can learn and be helped by whichever group is in front of me. What I figured out, I'm an independent, but
Me too.
What I figured out, the single greatest thing is, man, I have had people who have helped me make money, helped me in my life, helped me with my family, who came from all different types of political persuasions. But I had to be willing to set aside my cognitions and my constructs and say, wait a minute, I'm going to listen to them and try to understand them first. Now, I fail at that all the time, so I don't want to say that I'm perfect at it. But what I know is that I do a lot better when I'm able to listen. To me, it's like being in a relationship with a husband and a man. If you, or husband and a woman, if you don't have that doesn't matter to me, but if you're in a relationship with two partners, I guess that's the better way for me to have put it. The key is if you don't listen, there's no chance for that relationship to work. It has a zero chance of being successful. The real key to being able to make it a success is to try to understand where the other person is coming from. And it never fails when I do that. I think about my daughter and my sons when we were raising them. My spouse might say, hey, you need to spend more time at home. By the way, my addiction, and it is an addiction, is I work too hard and I spend far too much time on things that are like politics as opposed to the people who I care the most about. And it's just a I naturally gravitate right back towards it. But oftentimes I'm doing that because in my mind, I'm trying to help their future. Well, it's important that their future is helped out. It's also important that their now is being helped out. Yeah. And the idea that you have one partner in the relationship pulling one way and the other pulling the other way actually is a good thing, not a bad thing. And if you can see it that way, it's amazing. Not only can you find peace, but you're going to do a better job of being a parent or being a community member or father or mother or whatever it is that you're trying to do.
Right. And, and I talk about that in my book. Look, at the end of the day, you're right about any relationship, friendship, any relationship, it has to be, active listening, communication, not listening to speak, but listening to hear, listening to learn, and just hearing somebody's point of view, because somebody's point of view is going to be different because of the way they were raised, maybe, their belief in religion or whatever. But how do we have these healthy conversations without just, yelling and just, well, you're not right and you're this and you're that. And I think that, when we learn to have these conversations better, I think it's going to be, better for us. But look, you're absolutely right. I have friends who believe, their political views are totally different from mine, totally different. But, and I talk about it in my book, I talk about my dad. My dad was a Republican. My mom was a Democrat. I'm an independent, from day one. And so, I talk about, having, friends or a friend who is totally different, than I am. And, but, when they were going on a trip out of the country, she said, look, if anything happened, to us, we've already told our attorney, we want you and Darren to raise our kids. And I'm like, wait, what? And so, but, I am determined that I'm not going to let politics ruin relationships of any kind that's near and dear to my heart. That I can talk to someone and hear their point of view, and if asked mine, tell them mine. If they care to take a page out of my playbook, fine. If not, we still can, have a candid conversation, because there are more things that we have in common than we don't. And I think when we try to find those common denominators, and look, when we just realize, God is so good, He made all of us different. There's over 800 billion people on the planet, and you and I, both have different, fingerprints and, things that make us unique. So we're different. So we have to celebrate that, not get pissed off and rude because people think something totally different. If we do not figure this out, it's going to be the demise of our country. And if you don't think that, people are looking to see the divide and conquer thing, we got another thing coming. So we have to find a common ground, past this, political season, onto the next, to know that, what, you can believe one way, I'm strong in my beliefs. Somebody's going to be strong in theirs, but we can agree to disagree. And at the end of the day, we're going to have to learn how to live on this planet together, or it's going to be the demise of our country.
Yeah. So I'll give you a political story, and it's closely connected to what you did. I really got to enjoy getting to know Bill Clinton. And I can say this, I actually think I've met a lot of very smart people at the top of their game, a number of them in business, technology, other areas. None of them were any smarter than Bill Clinton. It's one of the smartest guys that I I ever worked with. And he kind of knew he was smart, right? He kind of knew that he was a bright guy. One of my stories that I love from him is that when Katrina happened,
Mm-hmm.
he had to go work on trying to raise money. So
Right.
he and George Bush Sr.,
Uh-huh.
your old boss's father, they worked together and they raised a bunch of money. And then Bill Clinton said he went back to George Bush Sr. and he said, well, what are we going to do with the money? And George Bush Sr. said, well, he said, you're the smart guy. Tell me what you think we should do. And Bill said he told him 100 ideas. Well, I want to do, put a little bit into this, a little bit into that, a little bit into this other thing. And he said that George Bush Sr. said, well, okay, that's a good idea. Go do those things. And he said, well, you didn't tell me what you wanted to do. He goes, well, I'm not going to tell you what I want to do. He said, I'll tell you what I would do if it were just me. He goes, yeah, what's that? He goes, well, all those people down there in Louisiana had their fishing boats wrecked. I'd go buy them fishing boats so they could make money so they could start paying taxes again to pay for all those things back that government needs to be able to pay for. And Bill Clinton says, he goes, it's like the smartest thing I'd ever heard. But he was willing to listen. All right. If when you start to think that you're the center of wisdom in the universe, good luck. Good luck. Right? Yeah. It's not going to work out well for you, in my experience. What he was doing was he was listening to somebody who had more experience and a different philosophy and ideology, and he gained something from it. Now, I love that story because George Bush Jr. used to talk about, like, during the inauguration, he and his dad sat together in the back as opposed to sitting up front, and somebody asked George Bush Jr., I guess, hey, how come the two of them spend so much time together? And he said that they were brothers. But to me, what I find to be interesting is that even the smartest people need help. And if that's true, you might be pretty smart, but you can learn from them.
Absolutely. It's so funny because I'm from Louisiana. And, I remember that, when Katrina happened, we opened up the first, one of the first shelters for people who were coming, from New Orleans, because where our building was, it was right off the interstate. And so, funny stories on that, and amazing stories on so many different levels. But I remember it was the time that we only had the BlackBerry. And so the regular phones were down. And so I was on the phone a lot with Jim Toohey, and Jim Toohey was saying, Tonja, what's happening on the ground? And I was, able to tell him that, and he was able to go back and tell that information to President Bush and other people, and I'm just so grateful that they respected us and they trusted us enough. And I could tell you story after story that they were so amazing, because when here, I was out here, telling people that this program was great and how it's changing the way, we do treatment and addiction for our country. And then just the stuff that, President Bush did when it came to, prison reform and things of that nature, PREA, so many different things that, people don't realize that he did. But anyway, after Katrina, you're right. I remember them coming together. I remember when President Bush came down to our shelter. I remember, just what they did, for us. And if you go, and there was a report talked about Katrina, what went wrong and what went right that Congress asked, President to the White House to report on. If you look, I think it's page 369 on what went right. They mention us in that document, saying what went right was small nonprofits like S5E31 who provided shelter and counseling and
that's wonderful.
And so many different other things. And look, there was a lot of things that, I, might have not disagreed what, some of his administration did. But at the end of the day, I knew that we all wanted the same thing. Everybody wants dignity and respect. Everybody wants, their family to be taken care of and to live safe. And so, when we start looking at those kind of things we have in common and the things that don't make us different, because I think it's beautiful that we're all different, then I think we can move the needle on true change in our community. Because you're right, there might be something that I don't know, which is a lot, but you might know it. And if it's going to be something that's going to solve a problem, that's going to address communities and countries, then why not listen to that person? And so that is how, we move the needle. Communication, talking things through, really leaning in and hearing what a person is saying and seeing who are the smartest people in the room. This might not be my area, perhaps it's yours. And even through this political climate, I mean, there's so many things sometimes I don't understand, but I'm grateful that there's people that I can call, or there's organizations that I can look up and go, wait, let me see what their views are, what they're saying, to make sure that they're credible as well. Because unfortunately, we have so many things out there that might not be credible. And those are another things that, I talk to people about. If you want to, address the anxiety that you have about the political climate, it's going to take you doing a little homework. It's going to take us doing a little research. It's going to take us doing some work. I talk about that as well. You just can't be part of the chatter. You have to be a part of the change, and if something pisses you off, then you know what? Find out what maybe the solution might be, or a way that you can be a part of the change, because at the end of the day, we all need each other.
Yeah, and it's to me, there are a couple of lessons that we can take from the divisions. And the first one is there are people who make a lot of money, who profit greatly, and who improve their position by terrifying you to believe that the people who are on the other side are evil, terrible people who want to destroy everything about your life. And if you believe that, then you become one of those evil, terrible people who decide that you want to try to destroy their life because they're an existential threat. Again, the first thing is to recognize people make a lot of money by terrifying you, and it is not nearly as bad as what you're watching. It's just not. I mean, think about your friends and who you go and meet with. Usually, it's even with people you disagree with or who are in the opposite party. If you've built a friendship with them, it doesn't matter.
Right.
That's just politics. It's on the side. It's not life. The second thing, you said a couple of things that I thought were really insightful. You talked about, I call it the big brain theory. The big brain theory is there's some big brain in the world that's out there that fixes all the problems or that causes all the problems. And of course, that leads to everything from dependency to conspiracy theories, right? And conspiracy theories say there's some big brain that's screwing us. And dependency says there's some big brain that's going to take care of us. The answer is that's just not true. It's kind of scary, it's a little bit at times, to recognize even the president of the United States, you worked for the most powerful person on the planet. He's still just a human being, puts on his pants just like all the rest of us do. And he's only successful with 1,000 advisors, with lots of other people that can give him information and help him think about it. And if that's true for him, that's true for the rest of us. The more advisors that we have, the more people that we listen to, the more people that we bring in our circle, and the more that we recognize that when we have those feelings of being out of place and that we don't fit in and that maybe I'm not as important, everybody feels like that to a degree. Even the guy who's the most powerful person on the planet, every now and then feels exactly like that. We all put on our pants the same way. And when you begin to recognize the wonderful thing is you're just a part of the human race. And that is what we do as human beings. But there's lots of help out there for you. Lots of people who will support you. If you lean on somebody just a little bit, you'll be amazed at how they'll put their arm around you and help you get to where you're trying to go.
Absolutely. I mean, we have to have these conversations, or I say these conversations in common. I never forget, when, I've had friends of mine, a couple of years ago and said, look, can we sit down and have coffee? I like to talk about something. I like to talk about, race. I like to talk to tell me how you grew up. Tell me your point of view from being an African-American female. Tell me this and tell me that and just listen, and in return, I listen to them, and at the end of the day, we realized we had a lot of things in common. We realized that there were some things that, we wish that we could have changed, just some things that we challenge each other to change in. But at the end of the day, we all wanted the same thing. I mean, they had family members who were having challenges, be it with their health, be it with addiction, be it with, losing loved ones. We all, we all eventually have to sit on the front row, and that makes us all human. Unfortunately, in my lifetime, by doing a lot of crisis management, crisis brings us together like nothing. And that's sad to say, but it does, because what crisis does, it almost, levels the playing field. And we realize, what, this crisis that we're all going through, be it COVID, be it 9/11, be it Katrina, so many other things that's happened in our world, we were all feeling the same way. We all wanted a hug. We all wanted to be heard. We all wanted to help. But how do we do that together? Because, we're going to have something else that's going to either divide us or something that's going to bring us together. And I hate the fact that, tragedy has to bring us together to make us realize, what, we're all human. We all want the same thing. Is there a lot of things in the world that piss me off? You better believe it. But I'm always going, what can I do to change it? What can I do to just pave the way for others, and I think at the end of the day, most people, are trying to find their space and place to see how I can make it better. Because if you're just sitting down, just watching what's being pushed out, on, TV and social media, that's not going to work. We really have to be a part of the change. And I tell people that, to get involved, not just vote. To me, voting is easy. That's easy. It's the other 364 days that it's the work, And so I believe that when we really sit down and have these candid conversations, or when we listen to someone, even though it might be making us, a little mad, but you know what? Let me think from their point of view. Let me see it from their point of view. And then maybe I can understand it a little bit more better.
By the way, that's the exact right way to ask it too. Help me understand that from your point of view.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That part. And that's so easy. I mean, just like you said, help me to understand from your point of view. And then, maybe think about it. Not just say, okay, you know what, I'm going to tune you out. I'm just waiting for you to shut up so I can start talking. Tell you how I feel. That is not communication. I mean, look, I can't get away with that in my marriage. I can't get away with that with my nieces and nephews. I have to learn how to talk to them, even if I'm feeling some kind of way about their new boyfriend or new girlfriend who I might not like, I mean, it's just how it is. I don't like them, but that's their choice, and, I don't want to say, I'll told you so later, but, I mean, again, at the end of the day, that's what makes our country great, is people have the freedom of choice.
Yeah, it is a wonderful place. I agree. And I think that oftentimes we fail at our own peril to recognize how great it is. Tonja, the most wonderful thing about this interview for me, I really believe, I think we overrate happiness. I think we underrate the importance of finding meaning and purpose. When you find meaning and purpose in your life, it makes all the difference. And you have definitely found meaning and purpose for your life. So just from my standpoint, I'd like to thank you for all you do. And again, thank you for being on The Optimistic American.
No, thank you for keeping it optimistic, because we all need hope. We have to wake up every day from a place of victory. And your show talks about that. And I just think it's amazing. And then we need to have more spaces like this.
All right. Tonja, again, thank you very much. And you have a great day.
You too.
Thanks for joining The Optimistic American Show. Now, help us grow by subscribing to our channel. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a like and a comment. There is so much more that we have planned. We can't wait for you to embark upon this journey with us.